Welcome to the Math Ed Podcast. My name is Sam Otten from the University of Missouri, and joining me today is Dan Meyer, a math ed communicator that folks might have heard from before. I know you previously studied at Stanford, and then I know for a while you were working at Desmos and doing some pretty exciting things there, and I know there's lots of love for Desmos amongst the math ed community. And now you are Vice President of User Growth at Amplify. And I think Amplify has some connections with Desmos, maybe on the learning side, but we'll get into that a little bit more. We're going to be having a conversation about your ideas, what you're working on, and your thoughts about math ed. So, Dan, thanks so much for being here.
It's an honor to be here, Sam. Longtime listener, first time guest. And before all that bio, I was a high school math teacher in and around California and the Bay Area. Just want to name that too.
Oh, absolutely. So, actually, we'll get to that in just a second. But before we get there, let me just make sure I'm understanding Amplify correctly, because I've gathered some things, around online at conferences about Amplify, but I want to just hear from you. What is Amplify? How would you phrase that?
Yeah, Amplify is a curriculum company that does its best work combining media like print and humans and digital. And we always think about what is the best of those media for the job we're trying to do in the lives of students and teachers. So I did a lot of work at Desmos on the digital side of math education curriculum. And then came over with an acquisition to Amplify, where I now think about how teachers take up these ambitious practices that are, surround pedagogy and technology and curriculum all simultaneously.
Okay, and that acquisition, if I saw it correctly when it was happening, it's the Desmos lesson side of things, like the curriculum with Desmos, that is now with Amplify.
That's correct. And the Desmos tool set, the graphing calculator that so many, undergrads and students know and love, that remains in the stewardship of Eli Lubroff and a core team over there with whom we have, a lot of collaboration.
Okay, so the tool is there, still Desmos, but now the curriculum stuff is all hopefully going on to big and great things with Amplify.
That's right. We're doing it. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Well, now let's go ahead though and back up a little bit. So you said you're a high school teacher. Let's just go ahead and what was the start of your math ed career? How did you get into this whole math ed space itself?
Yeah, sure. Rewinding quite a bit, I was homeschooled for 8 years and learned math very quickly, but a certain kind of like operational fluency that every math teacher is well aware of. The kids that can zoom through problem sets but don't really kind of get what's going on. In high school, public high school was my first experience in a public school. I had just amazing math teachers. Really benefited from these teachers who helped me deepen my knowledge and challenged me. And above all else, I had teachers. Mr. Bishop in particular, I could say the most mundane observation about mathematics, and he would look at me as though I'd offered him the world. Like these teachers could just like make you feel amazing about your intellect, about ideas that they've heard, hundreds of times, and that stuck with me. Did fine in college in mathematics, but couldn't figure out what to do with a math degree. And so Alan Bellman was the math ed supervisor then. He's like, hey, just do like a little 3 unit thing where you go into classes and then we come back and talk about the experience afterwards. I was like, sure, I'll do that. And he put me in a classroom. It was like honors pre-calculus. And those kids just loved math and they really revered me as an older college student, at the local college. And I was like, wait, so I can have a job where I do this, get to surround myself with these people who adore me and adore mathematics and they all just adore everything about each other all day long and a paycheck. And so I was like, sweet, sign me up. And, smash cut to my first placement in a class. And of course, everyone listening knows that teachers do not frequently get honors pre-calculus students. And so I'm teaching algebra
Or even if you
to
do, you
kids.
don't get them all day for every.
Of course, yeah. And so I got good and conned into math education by Alan Bellman, and I'm eternally grateful that he suckered me into math ed. But just getting to that class and realizing that, oh, like not only don't you like math on instinct as I do, like you on instinct distrust and dislike me as this adult authority figure in the room. This is in Sacramento, California. The next 6 years were all trying to untangle the contradiction that I was experiencing of like, I love this stuff and you really don't. Am I weird? Am I like, what's wrong with me that I have found something to love here in this? And through my use of tools and technology and homegrown curriculum, found ways to make transparent to kids what I and you and so many have found so delightful and life-giving about mathematics. That then led to work at Stanford and a doc program, taking that work into the private sector with Desmos, building that into something that could be taken up by teachers who adopt a curriculum, and now focusing at Amplify on how teachers grow in their teaching through the tools and products that they use.
Mhm. Yeah, and so you alluded to Stanford there, and before Desmos, so you had a very active blog, and this is where I got to know you and your thinking and some of your ideas about math teaching, and I think this is where probably a lot of people got to know you. To me, I was also just kind of impressed that you didn't wait to have like a certain degree, like you didn't wait to have a PhD before you were allowed to share ideas. You were sort of like, I already have ideas to share, or I have conversations that I want to have with other educators about math teaching, making a community that can share lesson ideas and resources and things. And to me, it looked like you kind of just started doing that based on your teaching experience and what you were thinking about. But take us into your mindset in that era when you started the blog. It was DY Dan, I know, is the Mr. Meyer blog. But
Yeah.
what ideas were driving you at that time? And what did you see as like your purpose for doing all that work and all that effort that you put into the blogging?
Yeah, so I created a blog. This is on the era of blogging. I think it's important to date ourselves, like when we came up, all of our careers are based on certain kinds of historical contingencies, and people listening now who are new in their career have a different set of technological and historical contingencies, and you got to know what those are to know how to be a part of them. And I came up at a time when the internet was getting pretty big in classes, and digital technology like digital cameras and digital projectors were becoming more widespread. I started a blog, and I did that to just write about my practice, put it out there out of probably too much self-impressed nature of my own work. But what I found quickly was a community of people that would surround one another in their public display of teaching and help one another grow better, grow as teachers. Like I was at a school where I was definitely the most junior among people who really had their game tight. And I was not getting what I needed. I needed to like get through some very early teacher type challenges. So I post my lesson plans. I post like what happened that day, and people come along and say, "Would you try this? Why don't you try this? Like I don't think this is as hot as you do. Like try this instead." And ingesting that and creating a community where I would come back to those people and publicly at a URL say, "Here's what I did in response to what you said." That would both create more feedback, that feedback loop, and I would just grow as a teacher and really feel convinced that I grew like 2 years as a teacher for every 1 year I was teaching and writing publicly about it. It was an accelerant for career growth for me.
And I thought was really nice was when it started to get some traction, it now made these really interesting interactions where instead of just sharing an idea of teaching, you would share like a dilemma or a question, and then these other expert teachers would chime in, and then all of a sudden the comments would be just as interesting as like the post itself in some cases. Started to
More
notice like,
so,
oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah, this like, oh, there's something like captured here, there's something happening here, and a way for teachers to just share these good ideas with each other.
Yeah, I still want that. Like we had that on Twitter for a while, and Twitter became kind of a cesspool, and the algorithm did what it did. But that was just there was a digital pedagogy at play there that I was so honored and feel so grateful to have been a part of and at the head of in some ways. Where like you post a question that catches in a certain way, as in a classroom, and the comments light up, and people are demonstrating their creativity. And I would like pull comments up in the same way that we select and sequence and connect ideas in a math classroom. That was happening online for me, and it was just a very joyous experience that has contributed to everything I've done since.
Yeah. Looking back, was there a favorite blog post of yours, or was there one that you felt like, oh wow, that blog post was like pretty influential, or really struck a chord that sort of stands out from that era?
Yeah, there were series, I think. Like I would post media, like an image I captured of something going on, a giant pyramid of pennies or something I saw in a store. I would post an image and say, like, what could we do with this in a math classroom? We would explore digital curriculum development, where at the time, like real world math problems, even good ones, would come with the information and the question and the media all smashed together, and instead just presenting a piece of media, a photo unadorned with mathematics. It's not digested already with mathematical stomach acids, and just say, hey, what can we do with this? And that created this idea of mathematics in 3 acts. There's one blog post, the 3 acts of a mathematical story, that I think has been probably one of the largest and has had given the most life to my career and my thinking about, especially real world mathematics.
Yeah, and then that became a tag, like having these 3 act tasks, and then that became a way to refer to it like 3 acts. Okay, what is going to be the first act? Then where is it going to develop? Then how is, what's the resolution kind of conclusion going to be?
Right,
So that
right,
that became a way to have a whole bunch of other sharing and ideas and conversations.
exactly.
At some point, I even remember bookmarking Did you collect like a repository of 3-act tasks and it was literally just a big old list of like ones that you'd made or people had contributed?
Yeah, exactly. I built a website while I was in grad school where people could go and upload their own. That was a fun way to learn and get a data set to think about. I think for academics, it's like, what is the value of the name of the thing, right? Like, you don't want to overname it where it kind of like suffocates any generative possibilities for other teachers to come along and say, oh, I can contribute. Like if I like 3 acts, not 10 acts, and not 1 act, where it's not enough structure for people to say, oh, I kind of get what's going on here. That
Mhm.
seems like a core challenge of that is an intersection of academia and teacher work.
Yeah. And around the same era, I know there was also the TEDx talk. I saw it on YouTube called Math Class Needs a Makeover that you did. And last I checked, I mean, this thing has hundreds of thousands of views, which for a math ed video is I'd say a pretty big reach. Tell us a little bit about how that video came about and, what did you try to achieve with that video?
For sure. I was just sharing a bit about how I saw word problems about math in the world fall so flat with kids and what we were doing instead in my classes using digital media to have these kind of co-constructed, like, I'm going to bring you into the scene where someone was using mathematics to answer a question, and we would build the problem up together from the bones. And I shared that, and I feel like I'm relatively talented in the world of math education with visual communication. So I had a lot of visuals going on, illustrating my ideas, and it just caught. Like I was invited out of the blue to this thing. They pull one TEDx talk to the main TED website every TEDx, and that was featured. There was millions of views across different platforms, some of which were not my mom reloading it. So that's great.
But some of them were
And
your mom, just saying.
I would say, yeah, there's quite a few of those. And yeah, and that really, I don't know, like it created it as virality, pre-virality. I don't really know how to think about my career absent that moment. It was certainly a matter of luck and privilege and timing. The Common Core was nascent, and my talk addressed themes that were resonant with the Common Core without even knowing what the Common Core was at that point. And then you
Mhm.
have all these district level math coordinators who need to explain, what is Common Core math? And so they would often, I think, refer to this, here's this guy talking about it. And it was helpful in that way. So there's again so much historical
Yeah.
contingency around that moment.
Well, and I think the visual is a key part of it. I mean, I still remember the visual there where you have a graphic like a graph, but you strip away a lot of the information and you're sort of like, let's look at some of the bones of it first, and then let's start to put the information on as it
Yeah.
makes sense, and you do that with the students. And so that visual, I think, is a nice way to think about it, like getting the class with you to think through the mathematics of what's happening instead of just kind of presenting them, hitting them with it, making them sift through it. It's like, no, we're going to build it together. So that visual, I
Yeah.
think, was powerful. And I think that video might have also been the one where you used a metaphor, and metaphors can also be a powerful way. Like, I'm trying to think about like why does this idea catch on? Why does it sort of share with spread
Right.
to other people? Is that the video where you also had the idea about the headache and the aspirin?
No, that one came through grad school,
Okay, that's a different one.
encountering the work of Gershon Harel at UC San Diego, thinking about intellectual need for mathematics. Like, why did someone say we need something new here? What were they experiencing at that time? And so there again, a metaphor arises, like, oh, so let's treat math not like a vitamin that you take because it helps you, be healthy and get a job, but like it was actually an aspirin for some headache that someone's experiencing. How do we put kids in a place to experience that headache before offering them ideas?
Okay, and that just might just be this little curiosity of like, huh, how would that work? Or how could we do that? That's the headache. And then you'd be like, all right, now we're going to learn this technique. And wow, that technique exactly solves the kind of thing we were troubled by.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or also just like bigger numbers require different kinds of techniques for addition. They give the need for algorithms. You don't have to like, draw each of the little, unit cubes, that kind of thing. Or
Mhm.
algebra itself came from like the need to have more efficient ways to find unknowns or establish truth. And so it's helpful to like put kids in a place where they experience the difficulty that arises from not having those tools for a moment before then offering them those tools. And
Mhm.
that was another metaphor that was really potent in my career that came from grad school,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
nice.
And now you were talking about the era of the technology and kind of, what modes of communication are available at the time. So I know we've kind of moved past that blog era, but you moved over to Substack. Are you still active on Substack? And if people were looking at your Substack, what might they find there?
Yeah, I have a pause on my Substack newsletter. I was writing a weekly newsletter, and the challenge right now for me is that so much of my readership came from my math education days, decades ago.
Is
But at
it
the
decades
moment,
already? My goodness.
Yeah, don't think about it. But I feel very, very, very interested right now in new technologies like AI and how I see them infiltrating and diminishing math teaching, math students, and math instruction. So I'm kind of like I have this a bit of a bipolarity in my writing right now, which I don't know how to reconcile that. So I've taken a pause, especially while I work on some other projects, like a book, which will be out in 20 mumbles, and also a project at work that needs more of my time. But
Oh,
a mix of tech and math ed at that Substack.
okay, sure. Well, let's pick up on your kind of career trajectory. Tell us about when you took the position at Desmos. What led to you taking that position? And then, was that what you were kind of intending to do, or is it something that arose? And what were the ideas that were floating around in your head that you felt like the Desmos position could help you kind of dig into?
Sure. I gotta say, I loved grad school. I loved writing my dissertation. This is not super common opinions about grad school, maybe the dissertation part. I knew from quarter one of my first year that I would not probably be a math education researcher, a fact which I kept kind of quiet at my R1 university, where the goal is to train your progeny. I had Jo Bowler as an advisor. She was very generous, and she understands as well as anybody like all the different kinds of opportunities for communication outside of academia. I was spoiled a bit by blogging and having such fast turnaround on ideas and the iterative nature of that. I didn't know how I could handle that in the kind of the publication modes of the university. At the same time as I was in grad school, things got really hot in technology. People saw the internet and digital media, and they said, "Here's the opportunity in math education. We will record ourselves talking about math ideas, and the internet will distribute us talking about ideas to millions of kids, right? Or we will ask kids questions about math and multiple choice responses, and we will instantaneously tell them if they are right or if they were wrong." And that was the dominant mode that led to MOOCs and Khan Academy and all these things. And I, having worked with kids who I know have very negative feelings about math, other folks don't always know that. I was using media and enjoying how media could elicit new connections and new ideas from kids and produce in them a deeper connection to each other and to the world outside the classroom. So I worked with some technologists at Desmos and just played with those theses about tech and math ed, where we had kids, you'd draw a sketch of a graph and you'd press play. You would play your graph and see how it controls an animation over here of a cannon person flying out of a cannon. And if you drew, non-functional relationships, you'd see two cannon people pop up at the same time, that kind of thing. We would go into classes and try them out, and we just noticed that kids were hot on it. And it was a different way for them to engage with computers and math ed. So that led to the sense that we should see how far this might go. They helped me develop my technology that would be for my dissertation study. That was an enormous gift to have, like a startup working on that for me. And then I joined up with them and we said, can we make a curriculum out of this model of tech and math? And that's what we did from there and built that up for middle school before sending that off to Amplify for more distribution.
And I'm going to try to sort of put in my words what I hear you saying about how that technology use is different. I mean, to me, it sounds like what you're trying to do is you're trying to have the technology engage with or the technology become part of the mathematical structure or the actual like deeper mathematical ideas that are happening, and then the student can interact with the technology and use it in various ways, but you're trying to use the technology as a conduit to sort of get at like the math structure or the math understanding, so to speak, versus the other uses of technology, which could kind of just be procedural or memorization. It could kind of just be like the technology is going to tell you some stuff, try to receive it or try to remember it, or the technology is going to tell you if your answer is correct. But it sounded
Yes.
like the way you were describing it is like you're trying to have the technology somehow reveal or let the student engage with or play around with this mathematical structure. At least I'm trying to get those words, but I feel like that's somehow you're trying to get into that at a deeper level.
Yeah, that's like the tech at the time. A lot of it was used for transmission or evaluation. And we saw ways that students could actually engage with math ideas in ways that were novel and also to situate the technology in the social environment in ways that were uncommon. The
Hmm.
dominant model at the time was everyone go to your laptops, and now you may as well be, in a call center booth with, walls surrounding you.
Yeah, the kid is just in their
Meanwhile,
own world clicking through
they're
on
doing their
their
own
own screen.
thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we created systems where the teacher has a dashboard and then teacher sees, sketches and text responses, and moreover has like a snapshots tool. Like we built that to facilitate the work of Smith and Stein and the five practices,
If you wanted to show a
selected.
student, yeah, a student was trying
Yeah.
this, another student was trying this, so you can put those up.
Yeah, or take one snapshot and we talk about it. Now everyone goes back and does their thing and take a second snapshot and see progress in time. Like this,
Mhm.
this is stuff that you do if you like have a real strong pedagogical convictions about technology. If you don't have those, you wind up reproducing the pedagogies of transmission and evaluation, except in a technological realm.
Mhm. Continue forward that on those ideas. You develop those ideas, and then does that bring us up to present with like AI and LLMs? And how are you thinking about the technology even coming up to current stuff?
Yeah, totally. The real challenge is that in our technological model, we are not teacher proof in the least. Like, we are greedy for any kind of capacity teachers can offer. And teachers often don't have a ton of extra capacity to offer at the moment. They're strapped, of course. But there's also novice teachers, new teachers, there's, teachers who don't have a certification, and so we need to build our technology in a way. We talk a lot about low floor, high ceiling math tasks for kids. We need the technologies and the rituals and routines to be low floor, high ceiling for teachers, or we'll put you on a path. It'll extend for days. Like a veteran teacher still has like ways to grow, but we are more accessible to novice teachers. And that's what I'm working on right now. And especially thinking about the moment where we say, I think that the five practices, which every listener is probably familiar with, I think that they're it's such heroic work. Like it is honestly, I hesitate to say an impossible work, but like when I go into a classroom and try to do that, I feel exhausted at the end of the day. Like you are mentally and physically taxed trying to read through 30 responses that are rich to the same question and identify themes and select them and sequence them in a productive way and then connect them socially. And what I found with AI that I'm so excited about right now is that AI can do some of those tasks, some of those five tasks, in ways that are more effective than the teacher. What I do is I signal to the AI and say, hey, AI, look for these common threads. Like my process now is to look at thousands of student responses in my own time and my comfy desk or whatever, and identify the themes and trends in those responses, and then use that knowledge to prepare future teachers that teach that lesson by adding in, like, here's the two kinds of responses to look for. The AI ingests a sanitized and de-anonymized set of student data and pulls out the exemplars and packages them in a discussion question like, how are these the same? How are they different? Or which one is not like the others out of these four? And it gives the teacher that resource. It just like pops up. It's like, hey, teacher, do you want to have a great discussion? Here you go. And we leave for the teacher the work that only the teacher can do, which is the socially connective work, telling a kid, hey, I want to know what you think about this. I know you've got more than you're signaling to the computer here, or like, I know how to like draw out of my class in ways that the computers can't and shouldn't. That's where I get really excited about this new technology to support really ambitious teaching work.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, what I hear you doing is looking for ways to strategically try, kind of approach those ambitious teaching practices, but being realistic about how are the teachers going to pull this off? How are we going to have many teachers from many different sort of settings and backgrounds be able to pull this off? So maybe there are parts of the process that a technology can help with, and then leave certain other parts for the teacher. I know you're aware of my team with Zandria Rajo, Amber Candela. We're doing the practice-driven professional development,
Yes.
PDPD, the nudges, where we're trying to make these very small suggestions for teachers. We actually talked for years about the five practices, and we recognized right away that they are much larger, more ambitious than the small nudges that we're trying to do. But we still are inspired by the rich things that can come out of the five practices, like sequencing and having those mathematical discussions. What we did was we tried to find a very small nudge that was like one little part of the five practices. And so we created one. We might be publishing on this, so we're still kind of writing about it. But we took what we thought was a very small step for a small nudge into one of the five practices, and we shared that with 40 something teachers across 10 states. And actually, our feedback on that nudge was that nudge is actually still a little bit too much for them to handle, at least based on the support we give them, which is we just give them the small little nudge and say, hey, try this out if you want to, but you don't have to. And we were like, man, we tried to go as modest as we could, and it still actually is somewhat of a
Right.
barrier for teachers who have their pathway of going, and they're not really five practices style of teachers naturally. So I think this is a challenge that we need many people working on is like, how do we make this a reality? How do we make it where teachers across the country can actually start to have a fair chance at success with something like the five practices?
Yeah, I find your work really inspiring, and always bummed not to hear more about your work, Sam, and these interviews with people. But
I've
I
been
do think
getting some in
there's
there.
a cool. There's a lot of overlap here in like how practical I think you folks approach some really abstract and important ideals about teachers and their disposition towards their students and asset orientations. It's like your work, and what I think I'm trying to do here is not like run a PD that tackles those from like anything close to a theoretical level. It's like is on the other side of the world from that, and instead says, if a teacher had adopted those orientations, what would we see them doing in the classroom practically? Okay, can we just support that work? And I think it was Gutierrez who I first heard say, like, we don't believe our way into new actions, we act our way into new beliefs. And
Mhm.
I just love, like, I saw you at NCTM. I think, tell me what it is, like, sort of wrong, mostly correct. I missed that, but what is it?
Super wrong, kind of right.
Super wrong, kind of right. Yeah. And it's like if I could wave a wand over the dispositions of every math teacher in the US right now or the world, it would be like, can you approach wrongness as something more than evaluation or shame? Like, this is interesting. Like when a wrong answer shows up across the whole class, or wrongness is on a continuum, as your routine calls out.
Hmm.
And I have more faith having done PD, having done curriculum, having done technology. I feel most excited about the routines and rituals that teachers implement daily. And I want to embed the higher level abstract ideals within those, versus detach them and try to approach them more directly.
Hmm. And it's actually becomes pretty fun to work on, I think, as I can tell from your energy, but we've had this on our team too, is taking that approach of really meeting the teacher where they are, thinking very realistically and practically, and then trying to find something that can become a new habit or that can become a new routine, is really exciting to see the teachers taking it up and then to be able to see like, oh yeah, I do that almost every day now. And we're like, wow, like we did this very small thing, but we met you in the right spot and we had it packaged in the right way and it had a maybe a catchy name, going back to the how the names are kind of important for it
Yeah.
to sort of be catchy and grabby. But then to find out like, oh wow, they actually now are doing that on a regular basis. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I love that. And another example from the work I'm doing is, like, if a wrong answer is showing up numerically, I'll just we'll pull that out and situate it in a frame that has like a teacher narration attached to it, where the teacher can advance the slide and it has a suggestion and just says an interesting wrong answer showed up. And I don't know yet what it does for a teacher to see wrongness next to the word interesting. But my hope is that for novice teachers, by ritualizing it and routinizing it, that will begin to change their perception of wrongness outside of those activities in the rest of class.
Hmm. Well, let's go ahead and just talk a little bit more about Amplify. So, you're the vice president of user growth. What's on your plate at Amplify? What are some of the things you're thinking about now, and bring us up to speed?
Yes, I can't focus. I have a title. I'm in the org chart somewhere reporting to somebody, but I work across teams in marketing, doing communication about our work. I'm working on product, where I prototyped this discussion moment technology, and now we're building it. Working in our coaching teams and our PD teams. I feel omnivorous, and it's been a blessing to be at a place that tolerates me just kind of barging into new doors and saying, "Hey, this is fun. Can I help out with this?" And so I know that you have a lot of doc students listening, and I don't know if I had any encouragement for their path here. I think it's to decide if you feel more called to be to go deep or broad, to be a generalist or a specialist. It's just very hard to do both and to kind of straddle both of those paths as your life and career goes on. I've always felt like a B, maybe B plus in whatever room I'm in, but have really found my joy and success in my career by integrating, the different worlds, by integrating visual media and math, technology and pedagogy, PD and new media, that kind of thing. So I did a computer science minor in grad school, and in my doctoral studies, you had to pick one, and there's a lot of great recommendations to do sociology or like psychology or something. I would just encourage the people listening who are thinking about their career, decide if you want to like be the person who integrates all these people and their disciplines or go super deep into, for instance, math ed, and break new ground there.
Yeah, and I also want to follow up. This might kind of connect back to the conversation we were just having a moment ago, but with Amplify, I know you are really passionate about making resources that are usable. And I wonder if you might just say a little bit more about what Amplify is trying to do with usable resources or what you mean by usable resources versus there's a lot of technology things out there. There's a lot of curriculum resources across the internet. But what is it that's kind of guiding you, or maybe at Amplify, that you think is a little bit different for what you're providing for teachers and schools?
Yeah, sure. I just think, yeah, with the resources that you're providing and other people, I can just look at it and say, oh, these folks know what it's like to be in a classroom where a lesson is tanking and three kids are asking to go to the bathroom, not because they have to go to the bathroom, because they feel bored. You can just tell when people know what's up in a classroom and how little bandwidth teachers have to think about or adopt new things. And on the other side, I see resources that are like that imagine teachers as people who are looking at a dashboard of student results that has bar graphs and line graphs and is analyzing it as though they were Bloomberg stock analysts with their
Or they
coffee, their
they took two
latte.
2 hours the night before to go through all of it, and like it's like who's actually
Yeah,
doing
yeah, and
that?
it's like who's doing that? Yeah, or like a lot of people, like kids. I am very hesitant to put kids on computers by themselves because I know that kids come to class in a huge part to learn from and with each other. Like the social environment matters. And so a lot of people build technology, they maybe didn't get as much of a thrill out of the social environment of a math class, and they build accordingly. And it winds up being not usable by teachers because it requires teachers to split kids up into their own call center booths. So we're always thinking about how do we benefit from and increase the social connection between students and between the teacher and students. And that makes our work more usable to teachers.
So it's interesting to hear about that work, and I definitely offer you lots of encouragement going forward. I can't believe it has been decades, but you're right. Like we've been at this for maybe longer than it seems. But with that perspective, having been a teacher, having engaged in the academic community for years, and then kind of now stepping and working in math ed, but sort of adjacent to the research community, drawing back and forth from the research community. I wonder if you could speak honestly from your position, what do you see as like a main challenge that we are facing or that we really as a field need to tackle in the next few years?
Yeah, I am so concerned about public education. It is one of the last spaces that aren't like fully segregated where we meet other people who are not like us. And I'm so worried about the current retrenchment and resegregation where we all have our own micro schools and retreat into moneyed private schools. I worry about what that does for democracy and the kids who remain in public schools. I think where the math education community can participate here needs to is continuing the work and deepening the work of helping teachers know how to work with the heterogeneity in like even the most tracked classroom has massive differences between students and how to make that tractable and life-giving. Like you and I wouldn't want to be in conversation where we both have the exact same ideas. We know how to work with our heterogeneity with two people with 35 kids in a math class and that discipline. Teachers don't feel like it's enormously difficult, and that difficulty contributes to growing disaffection with our public schools and a growing interest in creating these homogenous communities, which I think is just terrible for our country and the world. I hope that we can play a part in supporting teachers in schools in that important work.
Mm. All right. Well, my last question, though, make it a little bit lighter here to end, is what if we didn't worry about education at all? And what if you weren't in math ed, you weren't doing anything education related? Is there something completely different that you might imagine as an alternative career?
If talent were no object, I would love to be a screenwriter or someone making movies and turning stories into visual form. That was always a dream of mine as a kid. I still love doing some of that work on the side. But we'll go with that. Or podcaster, professional podcaster. I want to be Sam Otten when I grow up.
No, don't say that. But the movie story writing is interesting. Are there is
Yeah,
there
that'd be
is
it.
there a genre of movies or stories that you enjoy or that you're especially drawn to?
I love a good genre flick, like a sci-fi flick or a horror flick or a comedy that has a little more on its mind, that goes a little bit deeper on something. That's always my favorite.
Hmm. And do you think there's a little bit of the California that's there, being at least in the vicinity of Hollywood and the movie making and all that stuff, or is it?
I'm NorCal. It's a different world. It's
Okay.
we're just crunchy and living in the trees up here. But it's just who doesn't love movies, you know? So it's the spectacle,
Yeah.
the room, being together.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to share your perspectives. It's really enjoyable talking with you.
You too, Sam. Thanks.